From a sunlit beach turned killing ground to rising anger over hate left unchecked. From Hollywood's most privileged homes to the fault lines of African diplomacy, today we look at stories that force an uncomfortable reckoning with power, responsibility, and consequence. Well, when does political pressure become provocation, and at what point does protecting interests cross into trespassing on another nation's sovereignty as tensions rise over Washington's moves against Venezuela? As grief, ambition, and fragile peace deals collide across continents, we see the question echoing through each headline being the same. Who is held accountable when warning signs are ignored, and who pays the price when they are? Well, welcome to today's Flash News. We'll be right back. Australia is reeling after police charge one of the alleged Bondi beach attackers with murder and terrorism, as grieving families laid to rest the first victims of a massacre that shattered a summer evening at one of the country's most iconic beaches. The attack, which unfolded during a Jewish cultural festival, the Hanukkah festival, claimed 15 lives and has reopened deep national conversations about radicalization, public safety, and the reach of global extremist ideologies. Authorities say Sajid Akram and his son Navid opened fire on festival goers in what investigators described as a premeditated act inspired by the Islamic State group. Navid Akram, who survived the attack after falling into a coma, now faces 15 counts of murder alongside charges related to committing a terrorist act and allegedly planting a bomb with intent to cause further harm. His father, Sajid, 50, was killed at the scene in a shootout with police. As candlelight vigils spread across Australia and security is tightened around synagogues, schools, and religious gatherings, Jewish leaders warn that the violence did not come out of nowhere. They say it reflects years of escalating hate that went unaddressed until it turned deadly. Let's take a listen to Rabbi Levi Wolf commenting on the rise in anti-Semitism and fears within the Jewish community.
And you should not have to fear your life or walk around thinking, if I'm wearing a kippah or if I'm wearing a Star of David, someone wants to kill me.
Indeed, you don't have to. The Bondi attack has now ignited fierce political debate, with mounting pressure on Prime Minister Anthony Albanese over whether his government acted decisively enough as anti-Semitism intensified nationwide. Home Affairs Minister Tony Burke has rejected accusations of complacency, insisting the administration has taken stronger actions than any previous government.
We have been taking more and more actions and gone further than any previous Australian government.
But then is that assertion really the case, as it is being challenged sharply by senior political figures, including former prime ministers, who argue that tolerance of extremist rhetoric under the banner of free speech allowed hate to fester unchecked?
With this yes, but maybe approach that the Prime Minister has to this issue, and that's not good enough, Prime Minister. If he'd have shown a little more determination from the beginning and sounded as though he felt it, perhaps some of the anti-Semitism that has spread over the last couple of years would not have occurred.
Well, the most searing and emotional rebuke has come from former Treasurer Josh Frydenberg, who addressed mourners by saying he came not only to grieve, but to warn as well. He described the Bondi massacre as the greatest loss of Jewish life anywhere in the world since October 7th outside the state of Israel, noting that among the victims were rabbis, Holocaust survivors, and 10-year-old Matilda, a child whose parents said they gave the name, the most Australian name they knew.
I'm here to pay my respects to the souls of 15 innocent people who have lost their life in the deadliest terrorist attack in Australia's history, in the greatest loss of Jewish life since October the 7th, anywhere around the world outside the state of Israel. Rabbis, Holocaust survivors, and the beautiful 10-year-old Matilda. Her parents said they gave her that name because it was the most Australian name they knew. What a tragedy. This massacre at Bondi is the greatest stain on this nation.
Former Treasurer Josh Frydenberg linked the attack to what he called a sustained climate of hatred that intensified after Hamas's October 7th assault in Israel, citing celebrations of violence outside the Sydney Opera House, the doxing of Jewish creatives, boycotts of Jewish businesses, graffiti on schools, intimidation on university campuses, and the firebombing of synagogues and daycare centers. He warned that repeated dismissal of these warnings, the signs, made the massacre all too predictable. In his closing remark, Frydenberg accused the Albanese government of abandoning the Jewish community and failing the nation, calling for urgent action, including banning hate preachers and extremist organizations he says have been allowed to operate openly.
As a Jewish community, have been abandoned and left alone by our governments. Our governments have failed every Australian when it comes to fighting hate and anti-Semitism. Our Prime Minister, our government, has allowed Australia to be radicalised on his watch.
Well, as Australia mourns, the Bondi massacre has become more than a story of terror. It is now a test of leadership, accountability, and national resolve. Will this moment force a reckoning with the consequences of ignoring hate, or will it fade into history until another tragedy demands attention? For many Jewish Australians, the question is no longer theoretical. It is about survival, safety, and whether their country will act before grief becomes routine. And in Venezuela, we see the tensions between Washington and Caracas has soared dramatically after the United States President Donald Trump announced a blockade of what he described as sanctioned oil vessels entering and leaving Venezuela, a move that signals a sharp escalation in America's pressure campaign against the Maduro government. The decision comes as the United States simultaneously issues fresh demands for access to Venezuela's vast crude reserves, tying geopolitics tightly to energy security. For months, the United States has been expanding a significant military presence in the Caribbean, officially framed as part of an effort to combat drug trafficking across Latin America. However, Venezuela has been the clear focal point of this deployment, with Caracas accusing Washington of using narcotics enforcement as a pretext to undermine President Nicolas Maduro and seize control of the country's oil wealth. The rhetoric has grown increasingly ominous. Trump has publicly suggested that Venezuela's airspace should be considered closed, while hinting that operations to halt drug trafficking on land and could begin soon. And we wonder if this is a strategy of maximum pressure meant to force political change, or if it's the slow march towards direct military confrontation. Will the sanctions tighten and naval forces maneuver? There are fears mounting that a miscalculation could plunge the region into a conflict with far-reaching consequences. And in Hollywood, we see that it was left stunned after the son of acclaimed filmmaker Rob Reiner was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the alleged killing of his parents, a case that has transformed private family turmoil into a public nightmare.
Today, I'm here to announce that our office will be filing charges against Nick Reiner, who is accused of killing his parents, actor-director Rob Reiner, and photographer-producer Michelle Singer Reiner. These charges will be 2 counts of first-degree murder with a special circumstance of multiple murders. He also faces a special allegation that he personally used a dangerous and deadly weapon, that being a knife. These charges carry a maximum sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. No decision at this point has been made with respect to the death penalty. We have requested, and currently Nick Reiner is being held without bail.
Well, the story now gripping both entertainment circles and the wider public first came to light after authorities responded to a call at the Reiner family home in the affluent Brentwood neighborhood of Los Angeles. Police discovered the bodies of Rob Reiner, who's 78, a towering figure in American cinema, and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, who is 70, and a respected photographer inside the residence on Sunday. Their son, Nick, who is 32, Nick Reiner, was arrested shortly afterwards. Prosecutors say he could face life in prison without the possibility of parole or even the death penalty if convicted. The United States media reports have since revealed that the incident followed a heated argument between Nick and his parents at a glamorous Hollywood party the night before the killings. Nick Reiner is said to have struggled with substance abuse since his teenage years, a detail that has reignited debates about addiction, mental health, and family intervention, even within privileged environments. Now, how does a celebrated legacy coexist with such a devastating personal collapse? And could this tragedy have been prevented before it reached this fatal breaking point? Well, we cannot tell right now. But then we're heading on to Africa, where we see in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, the Rwanda-backed M23 armed group announced it had agreed to a request from the United States to withdraw from the strategic city of Uvira, a move that offers a glimmer of hope amid escalating fears of a broader regional conflict. The militia seized the city near the Burundi border last week, dealing a severe blow to recent diplomatic efforts aimed at calming tensions between Congo and Rwanda. Now, the advance came just days after the two governments signed a peace agreement in Washington. It raises doubts about the deal's credibility and fueling concerns that armed actors on the ground are dictating realities faster than diplomats can respond. In a statement, the M23 said its withdrawal depends on adequate measures to secure Uvira, including demilitarization, protection of civilians and infrastructure, and neutral monitoring of the ceasefire. The group also called for the implementation of a separate ceasefire framework negotiated in Doha last November, an agreement that, despite international backing, has repeatedly collapsed in practice. We wonder if this withdrawal would mark a genuine turning point, or is it merely a tactical pause in a conflict that has long defied political solutions. But then for civilians trapped between armed groups and fragile state authority, the answer carries life or death implications, even if they too have decided that they want the M23 to remain in Uvira. But then from the bridges of Australia to the oil routes of the Caribbean, from Hollywood's elite neighborhoods to the volatile cities of eastern Congo, we see that these unfolding stories reveal a world that is grappling with violence, power struggles, and fragile human bond. Whether driven by extremist ideology, geopolitical ambition, personal collapse, or unresolved regional conflict, each crisis underscores the same uneasy truth. Stability remains precarious, and the consequences of failure are borne first by ordinary lives. As governments respond and societies reflect, the pressing question remains, are these warnings being heard in time, or will they fade until the next tragedy forces the world to look again? Well, we don't hope for history to repeat itself before we listen. This has been the Flash News. Thank you for joining.
To see it with your own very eyes.